Hey, what's up, guys? This is DeagleBeagle here. So, I just created this probably about 20 minutes ago. The VGC 23 Pokemon only, Series 2 plus Ruin Mons, free, few pre-evos, Tierlist maker. Hey, did this for free. It didn't take, honestly, that much work. Well, it took a lot less work than I thought it would take, but I just feel like people would find this really useful. So, the other tiers, let me show you the other tiers you have to really use if you don't use mine. You have to look, there's no VGC 23 tier, see? So you have to use like, I don't know, oops, I keep spelling Scarlet wrong. Scarlet and Violet, but you have to use something like this or the all Gen 9. See, and it gives you all these Pokemon that you would never use, like Bulbasaur, that aren't actually, you can't even use it even if you wanted to use it because it's not in the, I think it's not in the Paldea decks. So, same with all these Hisuian or whatever you call it Mons. So, I'm like, someone's got to create a new tier maker, and that's what I did. I got a lot of these photos compiled, and I'm not going to say where I got it from because I don't want to give them credit because they screwed me over a few years back and didn't upload my what do you call it, team report from Dallas when I got top 8 in Dallas a few years back. Um, anyways, here is the, I'm going to attempt to put all these Pokemon into tiers so you guys can see generally what tiers these fall in, and a visual representation I think is much better for most people than just like a long list of all these notes I have next to the Pokemon. That's why I had made a PowerPoint for some of these tiers when I'm doing videos, because at least, or not a, yeah, I guess that is a PowerPoint. Slides, stuff like this, at least it's a list instead of all these notes near it. And some pictures are nice too. I'm a visual learner, so I think most people, I mean anybody, rather look at pictures probably than, at least for a Twitter post, look at pictures than this big long list like a textbook. Even though I might take off some of these notes for myself, but I like to just have it here sometimes to remind myself about stuff. At first, I thought Amoonguss was alright. It was pretty good, but it's like if they stop the sleep, then what is it gonna do? It's just gonna sit there and pollen puff. And at least you have pollen puff to heal an ally or do some damage, but in my opinion, I would say Amoonguss can be really good potentially to threaten certain teams with Spore if they choose to not really counter it, and they can Rage Powder. So it can both like threaten them offensively, but also support some other Pokemon like a Nasty Plot Goldango or whatever. So some of these opinions I may have not updated over time. Anyways, we're just going to put these into tiers and forget all the note stuff next to it. So the Series 2 tier list, this is probably the most up to date because I don't update the Series 1 as much anymore, even though it is very up to date because Series 2 wasn't that long ago, and I still try to update it because I play sometimes Series 1 on the ladder because in the real game you can only play Series 1 for ranked battles still. You can't even play Series 2 even if you wanted to. So I'm trying to get a team from a friend and just play once in a while on Showdown. But anyways, putting these into tiers. Now, I'm going to just close the old one because that's old. So this is for Series 2, by the way. But pretty much all the tiers almost all the Pokemon will be in the same tier for Series 2 as Series 1, except maybe a couple Pokemon that somehow get countered more by the Series 2 like paradoxes than Series 1. But I think that I can't even think of one Pokemon like that. I mean, I would say mostly just Pokemon that are outclassed usually. Like Hariyama is usually outclassed by Iron Hands. So like Hariyama, even Hariyama before before Series 2, I would say is not top tier in the sense that it is top tier if you use it on a Trick Room team with like Frigg, but if you're not using Frigg and you're trying to block priority instead of Trick Room, then it's like you might as well probably use Indeedee instead. And you don't want to use Fake Out with that. So, anyways, I probably shouldn't talk too much. I should just be putting these into tiers. So, Obama Snow is in, I put it as S, A, B, C, D because I know that's what most people do. But personally, I use different terminology. Okay, so whatever is S tier, I'll just say is top tier. I'll just say it's top tier. Even though, let me show you how some people would define it, like Jamie Boyd. Let's go to his King Ambit one. He would define top tier. I think S is basically top tier, and A is probably like what I would call great tier. Good or viable. What do I put? Viable. I think I just put viable. That would be like B. No, that would be. I think. Actually, hold on. F would be. I don't even have. It doesn't even let me create 5 tiers. I don't think. By the way. Maybe I should. Oh, actually I can. So this is F. I'm just gonna say, for the sake of this, S is equal to what I would call top tier, and then A is equal to what I would call from this. If assuming you're going with a definition like how Jamie Boyd would define it, even though maybe people define it differently, I'm not familiar with the. I've been playing the game a long time, but I'm not familiar with all these rankings because I personally don't know if I agree with other rankings. Rankings are somewhat subjective, and how you define it's subjective too. So, I don't know. I personally like to organize in a way that makes sense to me, not using someone else's ranking system. So, every person might use a different ranking system. Now, it will be hard to communicate that to someone else so that uses a more standardized one. So I'll just try to convert it, I suppose, or I could just call it top tier, great tier, and so on. So yeah, I'll probably just do that because it's going to give me too much of a headache to figure out, is it B, is it C? It's like these definitions are not specific enough to me. Top of the meta, I expected to see it often. Well, that's not descriptive enough, frankly, with all due respect, Jamie Boyd. That's not descriptive enough because what if somebody said that, let's pick a random Mon. Let's say somebody said Beartic is top tier. How would you kind of disprove it with this ranking system? You wouldn't be able to disprove it unless you try to say that you don't see it very often. But that has not that much to do with whether it's, well, it depends. I guess top of the, it almost seems like he defines the ranking based on, it's not, I'm not sure if he defines it based on the usage or based on how good it is. Like if it's good against the meta is S tier, or is it something that you see often? He makes it, to me, if I interpret it right, it makes it seem like he thinks it's top against the meta, and that it is also probably going to be seen very often, to be fair to him. So that's still a little bit. Well, I guess my every ranking's subjective, but I would say mine's more descriptive. So how I would define a top tier Pokemon is great on nearly any team without needing much synergy or resources. Okay? So that's basically a mon that you're able to kind of, quote, slap on to almost any team and it do pretty well. Even though, I suppose from that definition, um, Don Dozo might not be in here, but I don't think it takes that much. I mean, it doesn't take that much synergy. You don't have to go that much out of your way to like set up Don Dozo. You just basically have to switch in Tatsugiri, and you don't even take damage with Tatsugiri. So it's really not like it's not really that much of an inconvenience. It is a Pokemon that you have to run that you may not prefer to run, but it's like to me, the whole idea of Don Zozo and Tatsugiri are like one. They're like, they kind of go together because it's that type of combo. It's different from all the other ones where it's like you're trying to use Swift Swim with like a rain Pokemon or something. So I think it's fine. I usually, for this top tier list, I basically also I try to make it so that these are Pokemon that I can just slap on to pretty much any team and do well with it. And then for great tier, I basically kind of just define it as Pokemon that you can't do that with. That can still be top tier without. I mean, they can still be top tier, but they generally need more allies or resources or whatever to be good. So a Pokemon like Hydreigon, see, that's why it has an asterisk next to it. I think Gyarados I'm unsure about, so I'll put a question mark next to it, maybe instead of a, because I haven't tested it out in a while. It might be top tier. I'm gonna probably just say it is top tier, just for simplicity. But before I took out like pretty much all the rock weaknesses because like Rock Tar was very common. I don't know why it went away. Like, I never understood that. I mean, I kind of understood it because it doesn't have great coverage and maybe it relies too much on flinching to be good, but it would just flinch a lot and like it was like decent and sand. And even outside of sand you could just get flinches. So, I don't know. But I think it's partly because people started running counters to it, like Tauros Water. Like I was running Tauros Water just to beat it, and maybe eventually, and all these resistances to rock, and maybe people just realize, it isn't quite worth running anymore, especially with all the wide guard and having to predict whether they're gonna wide guard or not. So I think it was probably a combination of factors. But anyways, great tier. I would say a classic example of a great tier Pokemon would be a Pokemon that does really well, but it kind of needs rain up to do really well. Like Dreadnought is probably the best example of that, and it did get top 4 at San Diego Regionals. So Mons worth using in a tourney on a certain team to counter it, or to counter a certain team, but not great or good in general, or relies on an ally to be good. So I only have Hydreigon kind of listed in the top tier section, not because it is top tier, but because because it's used so much. And when I'm trying to team build, I'm just trying to look at this list to team build, and I'm like, oh, I need something for Hydreigon maybe, even though I know it doesn't belong in the top tier, because I feel like I gotta keep saying it's the most overrated Pokemon in the game. It still is. Like, that thing is not bad, but it's not nearly as good as people say it is. Another Pokemon that was used in San Diego that I don't believe is good, I keep testing it out once in a while, is like Corviknight. I don't think it's good at all. I think it's not really good at anything. personally. I tried to ask Alberto about it, Lara, and he didn't respond to me. I think I know why. But anyways, I just don't think it's a good Pokemon because you can wall some defensive like physical attacks if they don't super affect you, but so can other Pokemon better like Garganacl. So and it has recovered just like Roost on Corviknight, but Corviknight does have Tailwind, but like it doesn't have any powerful attacks really. You would have to use Iron Defense to even have a decent powerful move with Body Press. It's just I don't know. It's just I don't get it. I guess I'll never get it. So instead of here, I'm gonna just delete these personally. You can use your own tiers if you want. So I'm gonna say great tier. I need to go back to defining everything, but I'm gonna actually delete a row pretty soon. Viable, and then bad. I'm just gonna say. Because I feel like there should be exactly about 4 tiers, and I can explain why soon once I define these 4 tiers. I only define like 2, and you may be saying it still sounds subjective to me. Yeah, all tiers are subjective, but I'm saying mine is probably the most descriptive so of what it is. So if you say, let's say, go back to Beartick. If you say Beartick is top tier, I'm going to ask you, can you just slap it on any team? Is it great on nearly any team without needing much synergy or resources? And then what are they going to say? They're going to say, well, it does need rain or snow for it to double in speed, but though they might try to, if they don't want to admit that they're wrong, they might want to say, or they just for some reason think it's top tier, they'll just say whether it's true or not. Like Beartick might do decently well outside of a weather boosting its speed when it's not. So it's just like that's gonna really check them on their logic when they say that something's good. It's like our top tier. It's like, well, let's take another example. Hydreigon. Is Hydreigon good? I'm going to ask him, how many weaknesses does Hydreigon have? And they're going to say a lot or a decent amount. And I'm going to say, how often do you have to use a Terrastall defensively? Like, not just offensively, but like also defensively to survive something. And they would probably say a lot. And then it's like, my point is it worth using a Pokemon that you have to Terrastall almost every time because it has bad defensive typing? And then they might either get defensive and say, well, I don't think it has that bad defensive typing, or they might think, well, I never thought about that before, but I don't know if I want to admit that I'm wrong. Okay, so Hydreigon is bad. Brute Bonnet, that's why Brute Bonnet isn't on here, because it has bad defensive typing. Now, it isn't the end of the world for you to have to Terrastall your Pokemon. If Hydreigon did amazing, like offensively when you Terrastalled it, then it would make up for its defensive Terrastall, because you could also use it offensively really well. But is it one of those Pokemon? I don't think so. I mean, what is a fire Hydreigon? What is that going to do? A little bit more powerful Heat Wave, but that's not amazing. That's not overcoming that huge drawback of being like kind of forced to Terrastall. So it's like really predictable for the enemy. They know, especially in open team sheets, they know what your defensive Terrastall is. And they know you probably have to Terrastall anyways, even though you're showing them what it is, because they're going to hit you with a close combat. And it's like, well, if you want to survive that, you better Terra Fire. But even if you Terra Fire, you're going to take half of the damage you would have. So, I don't know. Anyways, let's just get to the tiers. I need to define just 2 more really quick, and we'll move everything into tiers. No, viable tier. So is okay or worth exploring further, but not top tier or great tier unless there is a new way of using it or a meta change. So did I say not worth using? I'm gonna just add on not worth using yet, unless you find some hidden way to use it that no one's ever thought of before. I put Pokemon in here that I feel like have a niche, but that niche may not be useful enough for it to actually be useful in a tournament. Like, or in, I mean, a lot of this stuff is just not useful enough. Like Reverum, it has a really unique move, Spin Out, where it like halves its speed after that hit, but it's like, is that really gonna ever be useful? Probably not. So I could put it in the bad tier, but like I don't want to be too close-minded for stuff like that. It's like that has a niche. It has a niche, but the things in the bad tier don't have a niche. I need to, in fact, define that. Things that have no useful niche that we're aware of, and don't bring it to a tournament. Because at least the things that are viable have a niche. But something like Frostmoth, I don't think it has any niche. Or Choreo. Well, the niche, if it does have a niche, it's not good enough to actually be like useful enough. Like even if you help your ally with Dancer and you like also copy that or whatever, that's just not useful enough. That's not a useful enough niche, even if it does work. So it's like, to me, that's really no useful niche. Even if it is a niche, it's like not a useful niche, though. It's not a good enough niche. And Spiritomb, I got to take another look at because somebody used it in the tournament with like Snarl, Will-O-Wisp, and whatnot. But typically, I would say it's outclass. It depends on why you're using it. Someone else used it without Imprison Trick Room. I think they used it just for its typing, because it's only weak to Fairy, and they used it with Trick Room and Will-O-Wisp and Snarl. I don't think it's useful. I don't think it's worth it. So I'm gonna probably keep it in bad tier, but for now. But I'm gonna test it again the way he used it and see if I can promote it. Okay, so this stuff in the bad tier is obviously not guaranteed to be never useful for the entire VGC 23 session, but season. But I mean, 99% chance it is, because I bet even if I were to test the Spiritomb out the way he used it a bunch of times, it probably wouldn't be that good. I can just tell. But I'll keep an open mind eventually and test it out. I have a huge list of things to test out. Is it even yeah, see, the Spiritomb, I gotta test that out again. But okay, so just to go over it really quick before I start really quickly putting these into tiers. Top tier, Amon, you can usually slap on any team without needing much resources or whatever, or a defensive terrorist stall. Like, you don't have to worry about usually them like sending in their weather Pokemon to get rid of your Swift Swim or whatever. You can just use like whatever it is, Baxcalibur, and it generally doesn't have to worry about its consistency that much. Something that's great here would be like Dreadnought, where it usually relies on an ally for like weather or something, and it can do really well in it, but it relies on something like that. And then Viable, it's usually something that relies on at least 2 things, or it has a niche, but that niche is probably not useful enough to bring to a tournament. So personally, I would only bring to a tournament top tier and great tier Pokemon. Something that's viable, has a useful niche, but it's like, it's probably not useful enough to make that Pokemon good enough to bring it to a tournament. So it's like so niche that like it's not good in enough battles for it to actually be worth taking to a tournament. Our Bolivia actually, it's funny, I used to have it in viable tier, but I think it's in the top tier section now. So see, I even got to edit some of this stuff. I just know from memory, so if it conflicts with this, I'll just delete it if I have to. Okay, let's start putting these into tier. Obama Snow is in great tier. It's not top tier because it doesn't do well in general. It has bad, like, well, it has a 4 times weakness. I suppose you could theoretically use Sash, but offensively, it's not very good. It used to be way better with Blizzard, like years back, like 2010, for example, or other years. But it just lately, it's just in this series 1 and 2 meta, it's just there's so many ice resistances and Pokemon that outspeed it. It's like not worth using, in my opinion. Even though it did do okay in San Diego, but I still feel like Satitan and Abomasnow aren't that good. I just feel like James Evans just is a really motivated person. I remember beating him at Dallas a few years back in Top Cut. He was a good player. He's a good player, but as a team builder, I would say I don't think Satitan and Abomasnow is a great combo. I think it's an okay combo, but Aloma Mola, no niche. Altaria, I think is yeah, great. Or no, it is great potentially because of weather. What is it? It has Cloud 9. Amoonguss, Anavlape, Ampharos, no niche. Our Bolivia. Well, actually, it depends on if we're talking Series 1 or Series 2. For Series 2, I don't think in the offensive meta that our Bolivia is... I should just make it for Series 2. Where did I put our Bolivia? I did put it that low? No, it should be... What? It should be in great tier. I'll just put it in there really quick. Even though I wouldn't personally pick it, but it could counter some teams pretty well. But in the Series 2 meta, I don't think it would. The Leech Seed set is alright. It used to be actually really good in Series 1 because no one expected or prepared for it. I'll just put it... I'll just say this is Series 2. Okay, so great tier. And then Azumarill, top tier. Avalog, I don't think it's... What did I say? I don't even think I classified it, but I don't... It has a lot of defense, but I don't think it's useful enough. Banette, no. There's better Impris and Trick Room users. This top tier. This is outclassed, but I suppose it's viable if you need just barely more bulk than King Ambit. And then Blissey, I don't know that much about. Let's look at Blissey. I haven't even classified some of these Pokemon because I didn't look into them enough, but I looked into almost all of them. I would say I saw a video where Jamie Boy used it, but I think it's... I don't know. It's probably viable, but I don't know if it's that good or not. I haven't seen it ever do well. I'm just gonna say it's viable because it has a lot of special defense. Appleton, I think is viable, but it's outclassed by other Leech Seeders, which No, it actually Garganical usually outclasses it in the sense of if you're trying to use body press with it, but if you're trying to use leech seed, maybe it's different. But then our Bolivia normally is probably better than Appleton. Arcanine top tier. Same with Armor Rouge. Brute Bonnet is probably it's probably viable because I wouldn't say it's top tier or even great tier because of all its weaknesses. And you'd have to use like a defensive Terra, and it's like, what's the point really? And you would probably have to use like loaded dice with it, and Breloom and like Amoonguss would just outclass it. And then this Pokemon Barraskewda, I'm gonna say is great tier, mostly actually because of Propeller Tail. Propeller Tail gives it a huge niche through hitting Follow Me and Rage Powder Pokemon that nothing else has because Duraludon's not in the game anymore. And then this is just bad. It's outclassed by stuff. I don't think it's even viable. And then Beartic, I want to say, is outclassed by Satitan. That's weird. I thought I had... Okay, it's for sure worse than Satitan. This is... I'll just do it for memory, because I already know. Bramblegast has a niche, but is it a good niche? I don't think so. Or it's actually in great tier because of Wind Rider and etc. is pretty decent, but it's I don't know. It's probably more like viable though because it has moves that miss. I suppose you could use C-Bomb, but Wind Rider, it just doesn't seem like it could ever be that good. Yeah, I'll have to move it down to viable because it's like when we're talking about great tier Pokemon, we're talking about Pokemon like Camerupt that could be considered possibly top tier in a hard Trick Room team because you could give it like Iron Ball and outspeed even Torkoal or whatever, or some other item and do pretty well in Trick Room. And then Breloom, surprisingly, I think is top tier. Braviary, I would say it's usually outclassed by King Ambit or Annihilate, but I suppose there is a niche for it since you have Defiant. And then Bronzong, I would say is usually outclassed by some other Pokemon, but I suppose it does have decent defensive typing. And then what's the Bruxish Pokemon? It's viable. Cacturn, I think it's viable. I used it with Sandvale, Bright Powder, and used like Swords Dance with it and Sucker Punch, and it did catch some people off guard, but not that great in general. I'd say Ceruledge has potential, but it's not usually that good. And then Satitan's good too, but not top tier. Even possibly with Abomasnow, I don't think it's top tier. And then this, Viable Cloyster, is that Skill Link. I think Colossal in Series 2 actually is pretty underrated because you could use Surf with like Dragapult, Scarf Dragapult, and outspeed even their Iron Bundle. So, let me see. Colossal, yeah, it can be really good. Sometimes, but even then it's not probably worth picking. This Pokemon, Corviknight, I don't even know if it's great tier. Yeah, I think it's more like viable because it's just not good at anything. And then Darkspun, it has a niche, but it's kind of niche, pretty niche, like a gimmick. And then Cryogonal's decent as Haze, as Freeze Dry. Cloudster, it can be decent in Tricking with Muddy Water. Clodsire, I think, has Unaware, but is viable. Copper I want to say is decent in Trick Room. Yeah, but I would probably use a different Pokemon for that. This Pokemon's decent in Trick Room. Is this Iron Bundle? Yeah. I'm hesitant to put it in top tier because it misses its Hydro Pump. But I would say, it has been on a lot of top teams. You might want to just risk the Hydro Pump missing. But I would say personally, I know this is a hot take, but I'm going to put in great tier because you have to basically risk a Hydro Pump freaking missing 20% of the time. That's just not accurate enough. And that's one of your primary offensive moves. It's not like a luxury move like Sleep Powder, like Venusaur, where you can just like Sleep Powder if you're like at a huge disadvantage. No, it's more like it's one of your main stab moves. And what else are you gonna run? Terra Blast Water? I don't know. It can be really good if Hydro Pump hits, but if it doesn't, it's just not obviously that good. Even though it still can Icy Wind and Freeze Dry. Okay, and then this one, top tier. Viable for Paris Trap or something, but not top tier. Donphan actually, I'm not sure what tier it is. In Series 2, it might actually be top tier because the meta is so ground weak right now that, it'd be pretty good, and it has Sturdy, so you don't even need Sash on it. You could run like Lumberry to stop the Will-O-Wisps, so I'm probably just going to make it top tier, controversially, because I just know it's going to be top tier because, like, there's so many ground weaknesses. It has to be. Because I was using Mudsdale in the last tournament, and it did amazing. Especially with Inner Focus, that this doesn't have, but at least it has Sturdy and can run Lum. Like, my Mudsdale was kind of vulnerable to Will-O-Wisp because it didn't have Terra Fire or Lum. And then this is Dunsparce. I suppose it's viable with Eviolite, but normally you want to use Dunsparce instead, which can actually be pretty decent in Trick Room with Hyper Drill. Electros can be, it might just be viable because, well, no, I don't think Electros is actually that good, because it's normally outclassed by like Pincursion or something. It does have that typing, but that's immune to ground. But it's like, yeah, it's viable, but it's usually outclassed. Okay, now some of these Pokemon I'll just ignore because they're not allowed in VGC yet. So maybe I should have took off the Ruins Mons, but I figured they're going to eventually be allowed. I'll just leave them in. Fluttermane, I'd say top tier, barely. And Garchomp, top tier. Electrode, bad. I suppose this has a niche, but it's not very good. Deden just has no niche, so it got nerfed. Its ability. Top tier Frig. Fletchinder is actually either top tier or great tier, believe it or not, because it has Eviolite, and I did really well with it. Fortress doesn't have a really good niche. Iron Defense Body Press maybe, but that's not good enough. Florges is just, I believe it's outclassed normally by like Sylveon, but suppose if you need a niche with one of its abilities, I suppose you could. It has more special defense than Sylveon. Flamigo, I would say is great tier, but not top tier. Same with Cyclizar. Shed-Tail could be eventually, it could be useful sometimes. Dragalage good in Trick Room. Espeon, I don't think it's that good, but yeah, it doesn't have any niche, useful niche. and neither does Frostmoth. Glade is potentially really good offensively with sharpness. So is Floatzel. Oh, actually, Floatzel belongs in great tier because it's same tier as Dreadnought. Goodra, I think, is great tier. Yeah, it is. It has a lot of special defense. Flareon, I don't think it's that good. I think it's like viable. But yeah, it's not that good. Gengar is still really good. Goldango. Gastrodon is getting pretty good. Garganacl. Hariyama. This is Series 2. But even in Series 1, I'd say it's still great tier because it's really only worth, in my opinion, using with like Friglead or, yeah, Friglead, but Iron Hands is better now. Iron Hands, I'd say, is the best Pokemon overall in Series 2. It just has really good stats and decent moves. But I think a lot of people are going to try to counter it, so it may not be the best Pokemon anymore. Iron Jugulis, I would say, is great tier, but not top tier, because for it to do well, you'd probably want to use Hurricane with it, and that kind of relies on rain. And then Grimmsnarl, I don't even think it's top tier anymore because, well, maybe barely, yeah. But there's just so many counters to screens that I don't know if it's consistent enough, but maybe barely. Gothitel's great tier. Shadow Tech's a useful ability, but not useful enough to justify all its other drawbacks like low offense and stuff. And see, the point is, people have to use Sing to make this like Pokemon good. It's like, but that's not good if you have to use Sing. And this is basically just a second Gothitelle type Pokemon that they use on Perish Song teams. So Iron Tusk, I'm gonna say, is top tier because you can use it with one guy even used it with Sash, or you can use it with Assault Vest for it to survive hits and get off headlong rushes. Donphan has the luxury of not having to use a defensive Terrastall oftentimes to wall stuff, or not having to run Assault Vest or whatever. Hatterene, top tier, great for Trick Room teams. Hawlucha, great tier. It kind of relies on Indeedee though for Psychic Seed. Gyarados could be potentially pretty useful. I haven't seen it much though. This is viable, but overall there's just usually better sweepers. Hydreigon in the great tier. Gumshoes, I believe, is like viable. It's viable. Yeah, there's better there's better Pokemon, I think, than Gumshoes for Trick Room. It's just a little bit too nichey to be probably in great tier. Because that's like kind of on par with like all these other Pokemon that are actually like top tier if you have something set up. Like Camerupt being top tier if you have Trick Room set up. Okay, Iron Moth could be potentially really good. It might be great tier. We'll have to see. But potentially Overheat and other moves are really good with it. The main drawback of it is probably not having a second good stat move and being 4 times weak to Earthquake. But for now, it probably is top tier, but it might go down soon. Iron Treads, I haven't seen. I don't think it has a good niche. Iron Thorns is viable, but just kind of bad because I tried it out in a tournament and there's so much like Iron Hands and whatnot right now that it's not that useful for Rock Slide and so much Wide Guard. Crocodile is good, but it's not top tier. Too many weaknesses and whatnot. Houndoom, I think, is viable, but it's usually outclassed by stuff like Hydreigon. Glaceon, it's viable, with snow, but other than that, no. And then Glalie, some of these Pokemon I doubt I even have on the list. I don't think it's useful. I'm gonna check really quick. Inner Focus, but it doesn't seem to have an itch. No, that's bad. Most likely. Glamora, top tier, great ability, decent moves. Even though it does have a 4 times weakness, you can mitigate that somewhat with the Terrastall. Even though it's different from Hydreigon though, where it doesn't have so many weaknesses. So the chance of you having to defensively Terrastall is low enough to the point that is that Delibird? And I don't know if this is Delibird or Iron Bundle. Shoot. I don't know. I'll just put these two lookalikes here. But one of these is not Iron Bundle. I think actually is that Iron Bundle? And this is not. If that's a Delibird, that's not useful. Okay, I should take this out of the list. Jumpluff is viable, but Sleep Powder and whatnot, you can miss. Kingambit, top tier. This Pokemon is pretty bad, Grumpy, because it doesn't even get Simple Beam. Potentially, this Pokemon could be good. The Hippopotamus. I even forgot what its freaking name was. The Hippopotamus Pokemon. It's Hippowdon, right? Yeah, Hippowdon. Kind of tired. This Cloud9, decent ability. This is outclassed by stuff. Yeah, like Oranguru. And then Lilligant is great tier because it relies on Sun. Hexerus, I suppose, is probably viable. Breaking Swipe, well, I think it's more like viable. I need to move it down. It's just not as good. Like, why would you use that when you could use a better breaking? Isn't there a better breaking swipe Pokemon? I know there's Roaring Moon, but what else is there? Baxcalibur and stuff, yeah, so like, why would you use Haxorus? I don't know. Okay. Gardevoir is potentially useful with telepathy or something. Trace. And Iron Valiant, I would say, is not top tier, but it's hard to say exactly how good it is because I haven't used it that much, but I can just tell it seems like it's a Pokemon that seems like on paper it's good, but in a real battle, I've never had an issue with it, facing it. It does seem pretty decent, but I don't know if it's top tier. I think it's more like great tier. Houndstone is just viable with its ability, but last respects doesn't do much damage. Greedent's just bad all around. Gumshoe's viable. Could go viable with its ability. Frostlass, I want to say, what did I say it was? Frost, yeah, you can use Frost Breath with Anger Point. Heracross, I think it actually did pretty well in my testing. If using Mega Horn, but if you're using something else, it does fine. I don't know if it should be great. Some of these just don't seem that great though. Like, let me look up Clodstar. I gotta move that. That's just to me not useful enough. See, this Pokemon, yeah, Megahorn misses a lot, but it does have decent move. If it does hit, it's all right. But this Pokemon, let me see. Heracross again. Slitherwing should outclass it, so I should move it down. Normally it's outclassed by Slitherwing, but not. Oh, let's look at Slitherwing really quick. Slitherwing's not that good though, but I think it's probably better than Heracross. Doesn't get Mega Horn, but I don't think. It doesn't. But it gets pretty much everything else and more. So I'm going to say Heracross should get demoted. Slitherwing's not even that good, so Heracross goes in here. Let's see if this all makes sense to me. So far it makes sense to me. Now, Lurantis is viable. It's ability, but it's not that good. Viable with this ability, but it's like usually outclassed by some other better prankster Pokemon. Jolteon's viable. Kilowattrel's in the great tier, not top tier quite. I don't well, maybe. Now, I think now there's better Tailwinders if you're trying to set Tailwind. That's why I think I took it off. And it's not very offensive unless you use like a physical life orb one. And Klefki is viable, but usually outclassed by stuff. If you need alternate typing, maybe, but usually you can just use a resist berry. And then Luxray is viable with its ability, but usually outclassed by other intimidators. Magnezone is viable, but you're not going to trap that much with it if you're trying to use it like that. Because steel types like Goldango, if they're part ghost, they can switch out, or if they Terra Ghost, I believe they can switch out. Scissor might actually be top tier, even though there are a lot of, there's like a lot of counters for it. Where did I put Scissor? No, because, well, I think it might be, if you use Clear Amulet with it and Terra Blast Water, it could really put pressure on some of these teams. And even Freg that blocks it, you can super effect that with a bug move, usually. So it probably is top tier. Indeedee male is usually outclassed by Indeedee female, which is top tier. Honchkrow is not that good, viable. I would say Leafeon is not generally as good as Sawsbuck or Lilligant. It just seems like it doesn't have the same niche. So I'm going to put it as viable. Mudsdale, it's top tier. Or actually, no, it relies on Trick Room. It's great tier. But it's top tier in Trick Room. Mabostic Stiff is viable with Intimidate. I'd say Metacam is funny. The thing is, it's probably barely top tier because you can run it with Sash and close combat and whatnot, and it does pretty decent damage and has Fake Out. But this might be a slightly lower tier, but I think for now it's alright. Meowscarada is good. This Magius is great, but there's usually better Imprisoned Trick Roomers like Fluttermane. So yeah, why would you use that when you have Fluttermane? I think it's viable now because of Fluttermane. Before Fluttermane, I just don't see. I don't see it after Fluttermane. But I suppose there's barely a niche for it. But even before, it wasn't a great Imprisoned Trick Roomer. Usually a better Imprisoned Trick Roomer is something that imprisons more than just the Trick Room. Like it imprisons their Psychic too, or Dazzling Gleam. Then it's even more of a problem. So Kricketune bad. Low Kicks is viable. Lumineon. Storm Drain, that's definitely viable just because it has Storm Drain, even though Gastrodon's probably going to outclass it nearly all the time. It's Tailwind, yeah, it's viable, but that's not very good. Cloth is viable with its Anger Shell, raising, I think, I want to say attack, special attack, and speed, but if you look at its moves, they're all crap. This one's viable because Intimidate. Muck is viable because you can use like Minimize with it. This actually is a decent Imprison Trick Roomer with its bulk, but actually it might not be quite that good because it does rely on Pain Split and whatnot. Yeah, there's other better Pokemon for using Imprison, way better, but it is pretty viable. Palmot, it's top tier on the right teams, but unless you're using a Dondoza team, it's usually not that good. Rangaroo is great, but not top tier because it has Instruct, but it's like there's usually you don't want to use the same move twice. You want coverage. But for like Rock Slide with Gigalith, historically it was fine, and it could use Earthquake. But like now, it's just we don't have something that I can think of like that. We do have like kind of Torkoal where they can just use like Flash Fire. Stantler is viable because of Intimidate. Raichu is viable because of Lightning Rod. Pelipper's top tier. Drizzle. All the Orcorios are, I suppose you could say, either bad tier or viable. I mean, I would just say bad tier because Dancer to me has never done anything useful enough to make it worth it. And then Pachirisu is viable because it has Follow Me and different typing than Mousehold. Palafin, great tier, but the fact that you have to switch out to make it actually a good Pokemon to me makes it, these are pretty much essentially the same Pokemon, just makes it not top tier. Persian, I don't think that's even viable. I have to update my list. Yeah, there's just no niche that's ever going to do well with it, with its move pull and stuff. Where did Persian go? I'll get to it later. Mimikyu is probably top tier disguise and sets up usually a reliable Trick Room. Same with Murkrow. Mousehold is probably Mousehold's probably top tier, but let me see. I don't. It might be barely not. Maybe it barely is, because Friend Guard's really annoying with some combos. You can use it with, like, I've seen it used with like Goldango and stuff, and not just Ape. So I guess I should say it's better than just using it with Ape. You can use it with other things as well. Scissor is probably, where did Scissor go? Oh, Scissor is probably barely top tier, or it's great tier. This is viable. Hellfish with Intimidate. Top tier Roaring Moon. You can just tell with its move pull and stats and everything. Even though it does have bad defensive typing, but I know of a secret way that no one's using it to make it good. Not just acrobatic set, but there's other ways of using it that I don't want to say, but I know it's just really good. And then this has Light Ball, so potentially, and Lightning Rod, so it could be pretty decent. And actually, Poltergeist is pretty decent with Strength Sap, because that's an amazing move. And Trick Room, Shadow Ball, and something else like Imprison. I would probably run Imprison, Shadow Ball, Trick Room, and Strength Sap. And then Salazzle's viable, or I mean great, because it has a fast Fake Out and stuff, but I don't think it's that good. Jetpack, and then yeah, what did I put it as? Salazzle. Guess it's barely that tier. Lucario is decent with beat up, but usually it's not as good as it seemed pretty good in the beginning, because I was using a gimmick with like beat up with it, but I would say that's more like viable because there's better combos with it with mouse hold now that we found out, like Lucario. I mean, sorry, Ape and stuff. So viable. Sandcastle strategy viable. That's not consistent enough. This is just bad, as we discussed earlier. Pincursion is actually great in series 2 because it boosts all the quark drive abilities, but I used it and it didn't seem that good. It was just so slow. It's good if you're trying to outspeed their Torkoal and Trick Room, outspeed stuff and Trick Room, but offensively, it's not that great. Well, I mean, with Specs it did alright, but it didn't have coverage, is my point, that I really needed, usually. But sometimes it did great, but most of the time it did alright. I mean, it's mostly, I mostly used it to boost Quark Drive on my allies or to stop Spore. So, I don't know. If potentially someone used with a jetpack, maybe it's barely top tier, but I doubt it. This is what, Sandy Shocks? That's top tier. Earth or ground is really good against the meta. It's the Viper. I don't think that has any niche. Screamtail, I'd say, is generally outclassed by like Grimmsnarl and Sableye. Like, why would you want to use booster energy when you have item clause and you can't use booster energy on something else now? And then it's like you might as well use Grimmsnarl instead, unless you need its unique typing. But it still can be pretty decent, but I don't think it's that good. Talonflame's top tier with its scale wings. Salamence, it might be top tier, but I don't think it is. Maybe barely. With Dracometer and Intimidate, it probably is. What did I put it as? Maybe barely top tier. I guess I'll put it as top tier. That's questionable. Because there's just Mons that counter it. Like so many Fairy Mons and stuff, and Defiant Pokemon. Rotom W misses its Hydro Pump too much to be top tier. I wouldn't rely on that in a tournament. Slaking has a niche, but not good enough. Same with this. Defiant, not good enough though. This has a niche in hail, or in snow. This is top tier. Pretty good at countering Goldango and other things. Sableye can be top tier, especially now with Protosynthesis. You can use Priority Prankster. You can use like Prankster Sunny Day with it. Sylveon, top tier. Umbreon is viable, but I mean, it can counter some things like Dondoza maybe, but not that many other things. Ursaring actually was doing really well for me with Eviolite, Rest Talk, High Horsepower Double Edge. Scyther, I'd say, is viable because of its ability and different moves than Scissor, but overall it's not that good. This Pokemon, I think it's just bad all around. Same with Vespi Queen. Did I put Venomoth in here somewhere? Yeah, it's outclassed by like Volcarona and stuff. And then Vivillon, I think, is a Pokemon that's viable. Why did I say it was viable? I think it has Rage Powder and stuff. Accurate Sleep Move was fragile, not very powerful. Tatsugiri is top tier. I'll put it next to Dondozo. Slitherwing is hard to say if it's great tier or viable. I'd say it's, if I'm going to put Heracross in viable, I'm going to probably barely put Slitherwing in great tier, but I don't think it's very good. And I don't know. It's about, but it doesn't have Mega Horn like Heracross, so it's probably actually in like the same tier, but you can potentially use it with Flare Blitz and Sun, so I don't know, and Terrafire. And then Sneasel, I don't think it might barely have a niche with Inner Focus that Weavile doesn't have, but probably not. And I think you can use King's Rock Fling with it. Maybe if that's what you want to do, or just use it with Weavile. Tyranitar, top tier. Noivern, viable, but usually outclassed by other Tailwinders or whatever. Spite Ops. I think that has a niche, but I don't think it's good enough to be used. Doesn't it have like that sticky web and something else? Silk Trap? Yeah, it has a niche, but it's pretty bad. I guess since it has a unique niche, it might somehow be useful, but probably not. And Sandaconda, I suppose, is a niche with Sand Spit and Minimize, but not really. Sarnia, whatever. Great tier, but I don't think it's usually outclassed by other Pokemon that block terrain like Frigg or Indeedee. Rapska is decent. It can set up Trick Room and use Revival Blessing with Leopard Berry. Rodham Mo can be decent in Rain, or maybe alright in general, but it does have a decent amount of weaknesses. Skeledirge is probably not top tier anymore. It just gets countered by stuff like Fluttermane and just other common Pokemon. Even before Series 2, I think it was not quite as good as people thought it was. This bad. Spiritomb. I suppose it's viable with some sort of niche. What did I put it as? I think I did put it as viable. No. I'm gonna say it does have a niche, maybe, because it has like Trick Room and it has its typing that's really good defensively. Really good defensively. No, what? Oh, no, I meant to take out Spiritomb. And then Sunflora can be viable in Sun and Trick Room, but you kind of need both for it to do well. And then I need to look at this really closely for the Tauruses. This is the water, I can tell because of the blue part of the mane. I'd say it's top tier. Same with the Fire Tauros. But the water one, but the regular one, I don't think so. It's like the fighting one is not that good because and I don't know, it might be potentially better defensively, but like offensively probably matters a lot more. So other Pokemon that are viable: Slowking, Slowbro, Squawkability, maybe. Let me see Squawkability. I don't even think that's useful at all. Squawk. I don't think I even put it in the tier list. I'm gonna just say it's bad. Or it has no niche. It's outclassed. Sawsbuck is good and is decently good in Sun. Espathra has a niche. Speed boost and whatnot. But it's kind of niche. Probably viable, but Luminant Crash is decent, but it's not that good. Pyroar, viable. This has a viable move. Earth Eater, I think, is potentially pretty decent with the Earthquaker, with Shed Tail or something. Volcarana's top tier. Good offensive. Good offensively. Good moves. Good stats. This. I'll come back to that one. Swalot. I don't think it has any niche. Let's see. Swalot. Not really that I can see. Defense +2. Who else has stuffed cheeks? So that's a unique move. Because you could use that with citrus berry. I don't know. Maybe that does have an itch. Wait, who else has that? So I guess those are all potentially viable. Because you could use it with stuffed cheeks and yawn. I don't think it's that good, but it's viable. This and what else? Oink that pig thing? Okay. And then... Actually, why is Belly Bolt in there? It's not that bad. Yeah, it's viable. It's not. Where did I put Belly Bolt at? It's not. It's supposed to be in viable tier. Not bad. Okay. Delibird is bad. That shouldn't even be in here. I should just leave it out of here. Because it's a pre-evo. I'm not supposed to put usually bad pre-evos in this Tiermaker list. I need to take it out. And then Weavall, I'm gonna say has a niche. Yeah, good for fake out. You can potentially use King's Rock Fling with it. Very fast fake outer. Wish Cash. I don't think that even has a good niche. It's outcast by Dragon Dancers, by Gastrodon. This maybe has a niche, but not really, just its defensive typing. This has a niche, has haze and whatnot. Stone Journer, I say is viable, because does it even have Helping Hand? I swear this thing used to have it, but maybe I'm wrong. No, it's just 30% boost. That's not that good. Lycan Rock, great, good in Sandstorm. Scovillain. Did I say it's not great tier? Because it's one of the only good chlorophyll Pokemon. It's fragile. I think why I put it here is because normally you should be using Sawsbuck or Lilligant instead. But maybe it does have a niche though with its stab fire moves. Let me look at Scovillain one more time. I don't think there's another chlorophyll Pokemon that gets a stab fire move though. So yeah, actually this should be high tier, great tier. So it gets a powerful fire move in Sun. So I'll promote it. It is a bit fragile though. Okay. Staraptor actually was doing pretty well. I think it's barely top tier because I don't know, it might be great tier though, but it has Intimidate and Scarf was doing well with it. It outspeeds so many things, and you can still Final Gambit a lot of things. It has less HP and doesn't have Ghost typing to prevent fake out, but I was just really using that Intimidate with U-turn and being able to Final Gambit when I wanted to too, or hit something hard with Brave Bird. So it seemed pretty good. Maybe it should be barely great tier, but I don't know. It's doing really well for me. A lot better than I thought it would be. And then Tinkaton, I'm going to say is great tier, not top tier. It just doesn't hit hard enough unless you can Gigaton. Hammering, you can only use that half the time. Wigglytuff is viable with competitive, but otherwise not that good. Vaporeon, I think it should be viable, but it's not that good at countering Dondozo because they can just raise attack. But it does have haze and muddy water and whatnot. I don't know. It's probably either great tier or viable. Let me look it up one more time. I thought this would counter Dondozo, but you can't really protect with it. I want to say I used Yawn, Protect, Muddy Water, and something else. No, not this one. It's a different one. Okay. I think I used haze. Yeah. Why am I forgetting? Haze. But it's not a great Dondozo counter, but at least it can kind of haze it and do decently well with Yawn and whatnot. So it might be barely high tier. Okay, Wug Trio viable with using its triple dive with like the Sandcastle Pokemon, but otherwise nah. Tropius. I don't know why people use Tropius. Even on, I heard people use it on high ladder, but I don't think it's that good. Tropius. Solar power or chlorophyll. What are you going to use with it though? Hurricane and sun? Air cutter? I mean, air slash? I don't know. Nah, that thing's like viable, but I don't think it's that good. And then Toxtricity, potentially pretty offensive, but usually gets shut down by Wide Guard or something. Skunk Tank. Stench Aftermath. Okay. This does not have anything that useful though. I don't think it really has an itch. Sucker Punch? No. I'm gonna say this thing's bad. But I'll have to test it to be 100% sure on that. I just don't see any niche with it. Any potential niche with it. I'm just not going to put a reason. So if people want to debate and say, you know, that I put it in the wrong tier, it's like, well, I don't have a reason why it's there. It's just, that's just like where I think it's at before testing it. If I have something next to it, that means I've tested it, usually. Or I could prove it with logic that it belongs in that tier. Anyways, Reveroom is viable. Toxicroak is viable, but not usually that good because it relies on rain usually. This is viable with Flail, Endure. Zorart could be pretty decent to catch someone off guard, but it's not that consistently great. I feel like I'm missing some Ruins Pokemon. Yeah, I was missing the ground dark one, the whatever it's called, Chiyu or something. No, not Chiyu, it was I forget what it was called. Forget it. It doesn't matter anyways. Skunk Tank's bad. I gotta fix this. Toad Scroll, I would say, is outclassed by Brute Bonnet. How come I didn't include Brute Bonnet in the list? Did I even include it? I think I did actually. I think I put it in here. Okay. What did I say? Outclassed by Brute Bonnet, but does have different typing and Trick Room, and its ability more consistent. If you're just trying to spore, it's more consistent with Among Us. I'd say it's probably, yeah, great tier. Just because it can spore like Garganicles and I want to say Goldangos. And has Rage Powder and whatnot. It's kind of underrated, but I still don't think it's worth using. So I classified all of these into tiers. I'm going to minimize it and share it on Facebook. Print screen just in case. Okay, thanks for watching. Please leave your comments below if you agree with me or not. Have a good one. See you next time.